Hello and welcome to Good Morning UK, Have Your Say, a Force for Good's mid-morning show coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. And this is a show where we are British, we love the United Kingdom and we want to stay together, and we welcome people of all views and none into this program. And of course, we're broadcasting on TikTok for the full hour again, and it's going to be a fantastic program. So folks, send in your thoughts. Chris is trying TikTok today. Hazel followed, thank you for that, and did Mick as well. And please do give us a follow on TikTok, because we're really growing, and we're really upsetting the Scottish nationalists who do not like to see us doing so well on that platform. Well, do you know, we had a busy week last weekend. You'll have heard that there was a Scottish nationalist separatist shuffle, which was divisively dawdling its way through an area of Edinburgh that basically nobody saw apart from a passing seagull and a couple of sparrows who happened to be sitting on a fence watching them go by, because of course they had been wanting, this is the All Under One Banner crew, they had been wanting to walk down the Royal Mile, and they had been planning and telling people about that for months. But of course they had forgotten to do the the planning permission thing properly with the council, and they had also forgotten the little fact that the Royal Mile was basically closed off with all sorts of roadblocks and traffic restrictions and digging up the road and all that kind of stuff. So one day before it was all due to go ahead, they had to get rerouted around the bottom of Arthur's Seat, and literally there was nobody there to witness them, although there was a very small crew of Unionists who were watching from the sidelines, and we were able to count the march exactly as it turned into the Holyrood Parliament Road, which is called Horse's Wind. As it turned in there was 847 of them, and that's an accurate count. 847 on the march. And of course they lied and they said there was 5,000 of them. Well, 5,000 would have taken somewhere around an hour to pass, because the way it works approximately is, depending of course on the width of the road and the speed at which they're marching, but it's usually around about 100 people passing in a minute. And so if you're going to have 5,000, you're going to be looking at least 50 minutes for it to pass. And in this case, it took about 7 minutes to pass. So you could easily approximate it would be something like 700 to 800 people. But we did count it exactly, and it was 847 of them. We call them the Smurfs. It was their annual outing in Edinburgh. Christopher on TikTok says, typical yes disorganisation. They really are last-minute merchants. That's a good way of putting it. Last-minute merchants, aren't they really? And they're just like shambolic. They're shambolic is another good word. Well, we were not there as in an official capacity, Adam. We put out a message 36 hours before that because of the change in circumstances, we have people that we have to be conscious and responsible towards, including all the people who signed up to stand with us on the Royal Mile. So we can't just change and mess them around. So we cancelled our event because of various security concerns, various logistic concerns, and of course propaganda concerns as well, because the last thing we want is to be stuck out in Arthur's Seat with nobody watching us and go into all that effort for nothing. And so, we have to take those things into consideration also, which is exactly what we did. So yeah, Bill says there was maybe 800. Well, it's 847 is what we counted, but they said 5,000, which was, ridiculous. And as you say, Bill, the media believe that. That's just crazy that the media would believe that. And when we started counting these people, like way back, we realized the extent to which very few people in society can approximate crowd numbers by just looking at them. You know, people will say that's 1,000 people. When you count it, it's like, 180 or something like that. And this must have been a thing as well, going way back into time. Ancient chroniclers saying, 100,000 fought the Romans or something like that. Probably was nothing really like that. It was just people couldn't properly estimate large crowds. Anyway, Gordon there says, good morning, leaving Walton-on-Thames to go home to Dingwall. 600 miles on quarter of a tank of fuel. Oh my, goodness me, Gordon, I hope you're going to be okay. Kenny's calling from East Kilbride. Marion says, hi AFFG, great to catch up with you. Sadly, I'm from the SNP part of Fife. And Robert says, the camera never lies, my camera never lies anymore, 'cause there's nothing worth lying for. Well, the Scottish nationalist cameras, they seem to lie a lot. The Scottish Army on TikTok says, we don't have fuel because of Brexit. I think that's somewhat of an oversimplification. Scottish Army man, or the Scottish Army as he calls himself, that would be like the Tartan Army. I don't think fuel and Brexit are related at all. How would they possibly be? That doesn't make any sense. And Kenny says, did they not claim 200,000 in years gone by? Yes, in 2019 they claimed they couldn't make up their mind whether it was 200,000 or whether it was 250,000. Joanna Cherry believed it was indeed 250,000, when in fact it was just a little over 11,000, which is what we counted them in at with our multiple cameras. Christopher on TikTok, we're happy to get the yesers in here on TikTok. Is slightly different format from Facebook and so on. So yeah, just bring the yesers on and have an argument with them, or rather a debate, I should say, on TikTok. That's important to do, because we're reaching out to all people on TikTok, including the benighted yesers who have yet to have the truth revealed unto them. And so we're reaching out to the fallen yesers in order to bring them to the light of unionism. That's what we're trying to do on TikTok, which is a very noble task and a very hard task. Some might say a Sophian task, but it is a task nonetheless that we have committed ourselves unto doing. And some of them are just misguided, A lot of these yesers people are just misguided. They've never seen anything else in Scotland before. They've never seen unionism, so it's about bringing them to, as I say, to the light. Stephen says the easy formula of 100 per minute was justified. It took just over 8 minutes to pass a fixed point, and only 847 was the total. Exactly. And Willie just points out the huge number of spin doctors that the SNP here have got to continue to promote their nonsense. Supported, I might add, by the British taxpayer. Isn't that ridiculous? And how often have we said that none of that should ever be allowed? Well, we do, Bill. We do lobby the government about the SNP using civil servants to make a case for Indy. We lobby the opposition at Holyrood, which is the Tories, and we also lobby and send this vital information and our points of view to the British government, to bring home to them the absurdity of what's happening, that the SNP is using the British civil service to break up Britain. We do that. We're just waiting for action, and that's the problem, you see, because what we've got here, and this insight occurred to me this week, is that we have a government, and I'm talking about the British government, okay, that likes to concentrate on nebulous things. That is to say, things which have no physical being, such as, reducing the Earth's climate, reducing the Earth's temperature by 2 degrees. A nebulous thing, something that we can't really understand or feel or touch. They like concentrating on nebulous, abstract things, but not real things, They think they can reduce the Earth's temperature by 2 degrees, but they can't stop dinghies coming across the English Channel. And they don't want to talk about the latter either. So that's where we are with the British government. And just because we're unionists doesn't mean that we think the British government is brilliant or anything like that. Far from it. Far from it. Goodness me. Goodness me. What we believe in is the core unity of all the people of the British Isles, however that may be expressed. But it has to be expressed through political systems that express that unity. Okay, you can't have groups of people going off in the United Kingdom in a small island doing their own thing. Good morning to Linda from southeast London. Hope you're well this morning. And yeah, the climate, as John says here, is all about control. Controls, another control mechanism, and another mechanism to make you afraid of reality, because the politicians love to make the people afraid of reality and then say, look, we've got the result, we've got the answer. And that's the nature of politicians, whether the British government politicians or whether they are Scottish administration governments. You see the extent to which they really like to make everybody dependent upon them. So it's up to us not to be played, as it were. Don't allow yourself to be played by the politicians, and just get right yourself with the universe, because we're in for an interesting ride as we go forward. There's no question about that. Here in Scotland, would you believe it? But at the end of this week, they're actually going to make it illegal for some of us to participate in society normally, as we normally would, without the proper documentation and papers. I'm talking, of course, about the V papers which are coming in at the end of this week, and which you can't get to a football stadium unless you show them. You can't go to nightclubs or entertainment without showing these passports, as if it's 1939 or something like that all over again. And when you think about that, when you think about how far society has fallen in the last 18 months, it really does pain one's heart, quite frankly. You know, I'm in a sort of mourning for lost freedoms that I thought that we used to possess, but apparently we never really possessed them. They were just an illusion because the state could strip them away from us. At least that's what it seems like. I would never have thought that you would need papers to get into a football game, medical papers to get into a football game. I mean, that's just beyond belief. And how, through the clever use of behavioural science and propaganda and government brainwashing, we've ended up in this situation. It really is remarkable and very disturbing. And then the question is, what are we going to do about it? Well, what I would like to see is the people with power, the people with voices, we've got a small voice ourselves, simply putting this message out that it's not acceptable in a so-called free and democratic society. You know, whatever you may think about the actual disease, you know, these requiring papers, medical papers for people before they can participate in society, that's like really wrong. It's just not democratic. And what else do you open up once you go down that route? What else psychically and physically do you open up? You just open up mass domination of the most powerful over us all. And that's not the way democratic societies are meant to work. So I would like to see the big football stadiums that have got a lot of money behind them and have got a lot of people who rally behind them. I would like to see them saying, look, no, this is unworkable. We don't want to do it. We don't want to subject our fans to this, because some of our fans will not have these papers and we don't want to deny them the right of entry. I'd like to see the football organisations doing that. But will they do that? Do they have the character to do that? And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to the character. It's not, oh, they're being paid off or whatever. No, it comes down to the character of the people who are running these clubs. Do you have the character to stand up for your supporters, whoever they may be, and even supporters of other teams, and say, we're not going to mandate these passports. within our stadiums, and you can take us to court because we're prepared to make a fight about this. Will they do that? They should do that. They should do that for all of our sakes, because it's not like you and I, individuals, can do very much, but these big institutions, these big corporations, they can make a stand. Okay, they can make a stand, and they will be listened to by the system. So I would like to see them doing that. I'm calling for them to do that. Well, and Kenny points out, why do we continue with the masks if we have double the rate than England, where masks are not compulsory? Or is this Sturgeon's control? Yes, it's all about her control. And Neri points out she wasn't given a leaflet to tell her the other side of the argument. And that's so true, because the government always go on about informed consent. Aye, you're the only one that's informing us, mate. What about the other side of that argument? You have to have the other side of the argument before you can have informed consent. And Richard looks at it from a point here, because of devolution with too many politicians with time on their hands, that's certainly for sure, to find things to do, and a lot of them are the type of politicians that believe the more the state controls and micromanages, then utopia will break out. Surely they haven't learned. It seems they haven't learned from the 20th century. That's Callow says, how do we cut down the amount of politicians? Well, that's a good point. Politicians are like topsy, is that the phrase? They just keep growing. Once you implant them, they just grow and grow and grow and grow. And it's very difficult to stop the amount of politicians that you have. And politicians are extremely well recompensed as well. So they've all got a good reason to keep themselves in a job and to make sure they don't pass any laws which put them out of a job, even though they're quite happy to pass laws which put other people out of a job, such as the care home workers who are being forced out of jobs now. Just think about that. Where are the unions, right? Where are the unions standing up for their members and saying, this isn't acceptable behaviour, you can't chuck somebody out of a job because they haven't had their medication. You can't do that. Where are the unions? They seem to be silent. I'd be happy to be told otherwise. And especially, right, where are the human rights lawyers? Because human rights lawyers like to jump up and down on basically anything. They're always in on things that they think they should be in on, where they think a human right, so-called as they understand it, is being attacked, but they're completely silent on all of this as well. And that's because the human rights of people who are getting chucked out of their job because they haven't taken their medication, apparently their human rights are not the sort of human rights that human rights lawyers want to protect. Okay, because the human rights legal industry is all about using law to promote their kind of politics. It's law in the service of politics. A few weeks ago we talked about Lysenkoism. Lysenkoism is science in the service of politics. Human rights law is law in the service of politics. And here's the thing, if your politics don't fit, then you don't have human rights worth protecting. That's the way that human rights lawyers will look at it. If they don't like your politics, forget your human rights as far as they're concerned. So it's very judgmental law in that sense. You've got to have the right attitude before they're going to grant you your human rights. I did law as a mature student at Strathclyde University, and that was very clear to me when I studied that whole human rights industry. But if you can get into it, what a moneymaker it is! What a moneymaker it really is. Well, Adam says these medication papers are delayed. I'm not aware that they are, but if you've got other information on that. That Preston journalist says, great show as always. Thank you, sir. I would recommend that people go onto YouTube and you Google that Preston journalist, and you'll find Ashley there, and he's puts out a lot of stuff every day and gets a lot of views. So please do check out that Preston journalist. We had him on the show 2 or 3 weeks ago. Great chap, great chap. Alan says, I think this Parades Commission is a slippery slope. Well, what that's about is the Scottish National Party are, as always, trying to clamp down on people that they don't agree with, because that's just in their nature to do. You know, people like ourselves we don't care who you are or what you march for or whatever. We might not agree with it, but we take very much the position that everybody should have the right to demonstrate and the right to march, even if you don't like what they're saying or doing. But you see, that's the old-fashioned traditional British approach to freedom of speech. Unfortunately, the Scottish National Party and a lot of other people in other parties don't take that basic freedom of speech position. They take the position that if they don't like what you're saying, they're going to shut you down. They're going to kick you off of social media. You know, they're going to make sure that you don't get published. They're going to try to ruin you. And if you're marching on the streets and they don't like what you're doing, then they're going to close you down, or they're going to make it illegal in some way. So we do unfortunately have that strain here in Scotland among too many people have that attitude. And there was quite a few orange marches, and there was a big one a couple of Saturdays ago. And of course this sent the nationalists into conniption fits, absolute conniption fits of rage, that they didn't like that. So now the next thing that they're going to do is they're trying to get a Parades Commission established, basically just to try to shut down as many of these marches as they possibly can. What an ugly mentality you would have to see something you don't like and say, I'm going to shut that down. Really, really a terrible, a slippery slope, as Alan Dawes says there. But that's what they want to do. And we've got SNP to consider commission on orange parades. That's from the National. We read the National so that you don't have to. And you do need a strong stomach to read the National, let me tell you. Oh my goodness me. First Minister, that's Nicola Sturgeon, tells Holyrood her government, it's not a government, it's an executive, will look at route restriction action. And then it'll be like restricting the people. And then you'll need papers to march. You know, you'll need appropriate medication before you can march. It's really, but look, let's remain on the let's remain on the positive. We're going to win this, guys. Bill says Alistair should apply for the new Talk TV channel when it comes out as a roving journalist. That's interesting, Bill. I didn't know much about that, Talk TV. Alan says it's about silencing all they disagree with. Loads of Indy marchers want to shut down the voices that they disagree with. Adam says that Preston journalist is one of the few that hold the SNP to account. And British Megan on TikTok says it's a devolved assembly. That's absolutely right. DJ has an opinion there on a comedian that he doesn't like. Max Power says we should outlaw Guy Fawkes Day. I think you're just joking there. Absolutely. Stuck's Music doesn't like orange walks. Well, I think you'll probably find there's tens of thousands of people in Glasgow who disagree with you, Stuck's Music. We simply support the right of everybody to march, and we can't see why anybody would disagree with that. Somebody asked why on TikTok there, why is the Scottish so-called government not a government? Because it's not running an independent country. Okay? It's not running an independent country. That's why it's not a government. To properly be a government, you have to have full governing control over your country. So it's a devolved assembly, which is an arm of the larger British state. We use the analogy that it's an arm of the British parliamentary body. So it's not a full governing parliament as such. And that's of course what the whole debate is about. It's about Scottish nationalists want Scotland to break away and have all the powers of an independent government, while we Unionists say that we have more in common than what divides us, and so our political institutions should reflect that fact. Now, on this day in British history, 29th of September, we're going to tell the stories of two great Britons. And people on TikTok and so on, they might wonder, why do we always concentrate on this day in British history? We talk about it on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, as well as here on TikTok today. And it's because it's probably summed up best in our wee book for the Union here. In the very first paragraph of our wee book for the Union, when we say, those of us who love the United Kingdom have a narrative, which is to say an overall national story within which we understand ourselves and make our case, which tells us who we are, where we come from, and where we are heading. And if you don't know where you've come from, then you don't really know where you are right now, and you certainly don't know where to go. So that's why we concentrate on history, to put everything into a greater, timeless, universal context. Because we're not just moving through time right now for a number of years. We're actually also part of everything that's gone before as well. That's quite metaphysical, but it is true. We're connected to the past, and the past is intertwined throughout all of our selves. So we like to recall to memory the past. And on this day, 29th of September 1758, one of the greatest Britons was born. Britain's greatest ever naval commander. I'm talking, of course, about Horatio Nelson, who was born the 6th of 11 children to the Reverend Edmund Nelson and his wife Catherine in Burnham Thorpe in Norfolk. And of course, he was famously to die in battle on the 21st of October in 1805 at the Battle of Trafalgar on the 21st of October 1805. So that's Lord Nelson. And somebody else today who is also, in our view, a great Briton, who died on this day, was the Irish and Briton William McGonagall. And he was born in Edinburgh on sometime in March 1825, and he's buried in Greyfriars Kirkyard. And, you know, people have given him a hard time due to his unusual and his quirky and his very amusing rhyming. But what is not so well known about him is that he was a great British patriot, and he was a great royalist and a great imperialist, and he wrote poems in his own inimitable way which esteemed the British and its empire and its battles and its monarchy. And we were very interested to discover his analysis between drinking too much and supporting home rule. And he wrote about this in his poem called The Demon Drink. And I love these words. The man that gets drunk is little else than a fool, and is in the habit, no doubt, of advocating for home rule. But the best home rule for him, as far as I can understand, is the abolition of strong drink from the land. And he goes on, and the men that get drunk in general want home rule, but each man, I rather think, should keep their heads cool and try and learn more sense. I most earnestly do pray, and help to get strong drink abolished without delay. So there you go. He could see these sorts of things, and his plaque in Greyfriars Kirkyard says that he died on the 2nd of September, but his the complete McGonagall, which we have here in the office, records that his death was today, 29th of September. But in the on the plaque at Greyfriars Kirkyard, it says, "I am your gracious Majesty, ever faithful to thee, William McGonagall, the poor poet that lives in Dundee." And of course, he was talking about Queen Victoria. My favourite though, my favourite McGonagall is, beautiful city of Glasgow, I now conclude my muse, and to speak in praise of thee my pen does not refuse, and without fear of contradiction I will venture to say, you are the second grandest city in Scotland at the present day. That's his poem, Glasgow. Oh, there's lots of verses to it, but that's my favourite verse. You are the second grandest city in Scotland at the present day. I saw that on a poster in Wetherspoons in George Square, and I wrote it down and memorised it. I thought, that's just brilliant. So he died on this day, 29th of September 1902. Thunderboy on TikTok says, would you protest if the referendum vote went to Scottish independence? Well, it's not going to happen, but if there was to be a vote, of course we would campaign to join the Union. D.A. Stussy says, why are you dressed like Danny from Greece? Just the kind of guy I am. Talking of these t-shirts, by the way, people have been asking where'd you get them. This is one of our t-shirts that you can get at our Teespring and Hoodie store. And on TikTok, if you go to our profile, there's a link tree. Click on that and you'll be taken to T-shirt and Hoodie store. You'll see that link. We'll also put up the Teespring link as well in the on Facebook and YouTube. MDivCM says, what's your deal? We are a force for good. We are Scotland's premier pro-UK campaigning organisation, and this is our weekly Indy and Unionist chat. So if you've got concerns about Scottish separation, if you want to know anything about what Unionists believe and so on, fire in your questions and we will convince you of the importance of staying together. So please do fire in your questions there on TikTok. Rachel says, what's your thoughts on the Northern Ireland Protocol? Well, as Unionists, of course, we're very, very concerned about that, and it is disgraceful to be setting up a border between the mainland and Northern Ireland. Of course, we're very much opposed to the Northern Ireland Protocol, and that's something that the British government has done that it should not have done. And we can only hope that that gets sorted in time, but it's a very bad thing for unionism. Alan asks a question that we're always asked: do you work with the other unionist organisations to try to get us all to stand up and be counted? We very much ensure that we're all doing different work, so we're not inventing the wheel again, so we don't step on each other's toes. Each of us has got our own strengths, and so we're aware of what everybody's doing, and we don't get our wires crossed in any way. But there's only really a very small number of unionist groups out there, whereas the Scottish Nationalists are much, much better organised on the ground and have got huge amounts of resources behind them as well. There's something called the Scottish Independence Foundation, which is basically a big pot of money that gives money to local Scottish nationalist groups. I mean, we don't have anything like that in the unionist movement, and we're probably never going to have anything like that. They've also got a newspaper, and a literal mainstream newspaper as well, which whatever you may think about it, and it doesn't have a whole lot of readers. I think that NewsQuest simply use it as a deliberate tax loss, or whatever they call that. A tax dodge, not a tax dodge, but because there's no way that can make money. There's no way that can make money. So why is it kept going? It must be to do something with whatever. Who knows? Anyway, so they've got that, and they've also got lots of local groups based around the SNP groups. So, but we do what we can. We make sure that all unionist groups at least know of each other and are on good terms with each other. And we certainly don't reinvent the wheel, because each of us have got our separate strengths. Do you know, I was I was saying that I read the National there so that you don't have to. Also read the Sunday National. And there was an article, there's lots of articles in it that always get my goat, as it were, but one of them that I just thought was very silly was this guy who writes every Saturday, and his big thing is the Constitution, because, you know, if we have the perfect Constitution, then Scotland will be perfect. You know, there's lots of countries in the world that have perfect constitutions but are all going to hell, okay? It doesn't always come down to what's written on a piece of paper. Anyway, this is this guy's big thing. It's like, get the perfect constitution and the world will be hunky-dory, right? Well, anyway, he was saying that he's blabbering on about a lot of stuff, and then he goes that the Scots never had a say in the Union, okay? And he's talking about the Union of 1707. Well, for a start, that's not quite correct. Obviously, it was a pre-democratic age, 1707. But there was a lot of Scots who were in power who had a say, and the majority of them wanted the Union. But that aside, what struck me as very interesting is he's still living in 1707. Okay? Does he not realise that in 2014, the Scots had a say? In this democratic so-called age, we had a say in 2014, and we overwhelmingly agreed to union. So why is he saying the Scots have never had a say? As if 2014 doesn't even exist. Okay? As if 2014 doesn't even exist. Okay, I have to read all this, right? This is my job. I have to read all this. But somebody's got to do it, right? Somebody's got to do it. But so many of these people are still living in 1707. It's like 2014 never happened. 2014, everybody in Scotland had the opportunity. It was the biggest turnout ever at anything that's ever happened in Scotland, and we voted overwhelmingly to stay in the Union. So Scots have most certainly had a say, and we've had a say in the recent past. But oh no, it went the wrong way. So let's not think about that. Let's go all the way back to 1707 and complain about Scots not having a say in a pre-democratic age. Absolutely just silly, ridiculous. Yeah, nothing else there that needs to be said other than to point out his unwillingness, like so many people, to accept the referendum of 2014. And how so many of us voted because we love the United Kingdom and we want to stay together, and because we're British and because we're proud of that fact. Looking on TikTok here for any comments. Great to see all the Scottish nationalists coming in. This is your place if you want to learn about unionism, because many of you have been, I'm talking to the Scottish nationalists, many of you have been deprived of hearing the unionist argument. You only hear it from people who can't really make it, such as politicians, but this is a real grassroots unionist organisation. We can give you the gen, we can tell you how it is, we can explain to you, what unionism is all about. So if you're a Scottish nationalist, if you're wavering, maybe you're one of these people who's not sure which way to go, but you've never heard the unionist argument made, then please do tune in every Wednesday morning to us, and we will help to convey the good news of the union, because we are evangelical, if that's the word, about the union. Okay, it's something you need to know how good this is, man. You need to know, okay, because it is going to help you in life as well, quite literally in life, because it will open up so many new possibilities and opportunities. And unity is the central word in opportunity. Yeah, not many of us were around in 1707, were we, Ray? That's right. Christopher says, we have the Union flag flying at the council in Livingston. Wonderful. More councils just need to put that up, because the Scottish nationalists want to take it down. And some of our people will go, it's not all about flags, Alistair. I think you'll find it probably is largely about flags at the end of the day. But I know what you mean. But it is actually about flags. And that's why the Scottish nationalists want to take down the Union Jack everywhere they go. And that's why they passed an edict in 2018 to take it down over all the buildings that they have control over. All the Scottish so-called government buildings that they have control over, that is. Christopher says the Nationalists took it down, but a campaign got it reinstated. Excellent. You see, that's great stuff. Great stuff. And Christopher points out on TikTok that both the English and the Scottish parliaments at the time voted for the Union in 1707. That's correct. Diggs says 75% of Scotland voted against Brexit. No, that's not true. It was 62%. And indeed, over 1 million Scots voted for Brexit, including a third of Scottish National Party members, because they quite rightly see that there's no point in having an independent country if you're stuck into this globalist controlled EU. So it always confuses me why any Scottish nationalists would want to be part of the European Union, given the fact that it's no friend of Scotland at all, and it never had been. So why would you want to make a case for that? It's puzzling. And remember, over 1 million Scots voted to leave without any mainstream politicians in Scotland supporting that position. So we were voiceless back then. There was no mainstream politicians in Scotland who wanted to leave the EU, and there was no papers in Scotland that wanted to leave the EU, and basically you didn't get it heard. It was only a voice from the fringes. That's all you would get, would be the fringes would be talking about leaving the EU. There was no mainstream voice to leave the EU, yet still over 1 million Scots voted to leave. Almost 40%, almost 2 in 5 voted to leave. What does that tell you? If you had had a mainstream voice speaking to leave the EU, the vote would have been an awful lot closer. You see, in England, they did have mainstream voices talking against it, but in Scotland, we had nobody. Yeah, Richard, symbols are important and speak to the heart and mind. Exactly. We have the Union flag flying on Perth Council buildings. Good. We have the Union flag flying here in our office as well. I don't know if you've spotted it. If you can spot the Union flag, please do tell us. Some people come in here and they're like, why don't you have the Union flag up, Alistair? I thought you would. You know what I mean? I'm surprised you're not flying the Union flag. Talking about flying the Union flag, that A2 poster behind us, that's available in our shop. But if you want something smaller, you can get it. That's available in our shop as well. And if you buy one, then what we'll do is we'll also throw in all the back copies of Union Heart. And that's 3 to date so far. Switch off Sturgeon, eh? Switch off Sturgeon. That's true. Folks, it's 11:30. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week. Please do get your wee book for the Union if you haven't already. We're going to have to get a third edition of this out because we're now at the bottom of the final box of them. They've been flying out, and if this was promoted on the mainstream, it would sell thousands. It would sell thousands, believe me. But we can only promote it via the mechanisms that we can. So please do get your wee book in, or simply share this broadcast so that the good news can be brought to other people. So it just remains for me to say, folks, we'll be back. Thanks for all your comments. And same time next week. So please do give us a follow. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.